Hello and welcome to a special mid-season review episode of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Dan and Logan. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Starting to feel in the festive mood.
I'm doing well as well, Alex and Dan. Yeah, it's kind of and also kind of not. It's half festive and half tense, I guess, is probably the best way to sum up how things are at the moment.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, before we get onto the city news, I don't know the word for it, but when we signed off with the Wise Men Say guys, and I was sort of wishing them all the best and hoping that they could stay safe because we were doing quite well down here, but not so well over in England. It was almost the next day that we started to get some pretty bad news down here, and particularly in your neck of the woods, Logan. So, sort of fingers crossed that everything works out with you guys and you guys can have a pretty decent Christmas. But as you say, pretty tense at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all changed really quickly. I think I started to hear a bit of the scare tactics, or at least that's what I labelled the news stories, and then just amazing to see how quickly things can change with the spike in cases, and then all of a sudden, as you mentioned, my area is back down into a lockdown till at least this time Wednesday midnight. So really
wow.
Interesting. But it's when you consider how good we have it compared to the many other places in the world, it reminds us of how fortunate we are, but also I guess how dangerous and how I guess entrenched this thing still is.
Yeah, definitely. And look, there's a few cases in my suburb as well, I think. So I'm sort of keeping an eye out on the news every so often to make sure that everything's still okay. I'm heading into work tomorrow, for instance. So for me, it's pretty much life is as usual at the moment. But obviously, want to do everything I can to make sure that Christmas is safe and as normal as possible. We've actually just also got Brad, who's just joined us. So I'll add him in now. Brad, how are you?
Good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, very good, very good. We were just talking about just before we got onto the city news, just the latest unfortunate news with the outbreak here in New South Wales and the impacts that will have. But as Logan says, I think in the scheme of things, we're in a much more fortunate position than people in the UK. So our thoughts obviously still definitely with those in the UK and how they're coping with everything at the moment.
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, it is our sort of mid-season review, but we have had a game since our last episode. So I thought we would kick things off with a review of that unfortunate loss to Portsmouth. I mean, I don't think it's every day that you lose a game where the opposition doesn't have a shot on target, 2-0. Look, I'll start with you, Dan, on this one. Pretty unfortunate the manner of the first goal for Greaves. I've seen some cases made that perhaps it should have been chalked off for a foul, but the second one, not so much. I mean, Jenna's made pretty sure that went in the back of the net with two stabs at it. But how did you see the manner of the game?
Oh, look, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head when you said that it's not very often that you score both goals in a game and lose. So it was pretty frustrating to watch. I guess it's not just that game, but it's a follow-on from the last few games where we've just seemed really flat and we haven't really been up to the mark. And I think the last time I was on, we were talking about how the press and the opposition managers were challenging us, that saying every time we, came up against someone half decent, they'd say this was the challenge that we had to pass and we were passing them all and they should just give us the credit that we were due. But now the challenges are coming and we seem to be and we're not meeting them, which is pretty disappointing. But I think the game overall, I really don't know how to describe it. It was tough to watch. I mean, we still somehow managed to create ourselves a few chances that we should have probably done something with. But I think it speaks volumes when you say that your right back is your most dangerous attacking weapon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what did you think of the game, Logan? I guess we were sort of talking during the game, or I was sort of tweeting out during the game, and I think the point that a lot of people were highlighting was we really felt like we were missing George Honeyman in our midfield for the game, and the impetus that he creates. And look, as Dan said, it seemed as if we were creating chances, we just couldn't create the right chances.
Yeah, a really strange game. I think Dan's kind of highlighted the gist of what happened, but realistically, I got the feeling that the game could have gone for 180 minutes and we still were going to almost be at no closer to scoring. And equally, I don't think Portsmouth really looked like they were going to score. That first goal, the own goal, it certainly should have been scrapped off. You mentioned it as being controversial. I can't see how you could award that in any single game, and particularly if that foul happens anywhere else on the pitch, it gets awarded away. I think the referee made a huge error in allowing that. And for that to be chalked down as an own goal is pretty disappointing. But if you take that out of the equation, and then the one that actually was an unfortunate goal, the McGuinness own goal, really disappointing. Just it was one of those games that I was really glad for it to end, even though I guess our fate had been sealed. But really disappointing result. And I guess what made it worse for me was I felt incredibly optimistic about the chances of that game, and the way that we just turned up and didn't even really look close to a shadow of some of the glimpses we've seen from the team earlier in the season is quite a large cause for concern heading into this Christmas period.
Yeah, look, I mean, you and I were speaking last week about how it could go one of two ways, whether Portsmouth would sort of go into the game really open and attacking and sort of give us the chances like we had against Ipswich, or else whether they'd be a bit more intelligent and play in the similar style to the teams we've faced in recent weeks, who have sort of found us out of it. Brad, do you sort of, I guess, looking at the results over the last few weeks, get that sense that perhaps teams are starting to find us out, or is it more a case of missing personnel like Honeyman that might be more a cause for the lack of results?
Oh, look, I think it's probably a combination of all of the things. I mean, I think at the moment the concern obviously is we looked like a goal-scoring machine until 3 games ago, and we don't seem to be looking like we're even kicking to the right end. And then on the back of that, sure, there's key players. I think Honeyman being out is of a real concern, and obviously one of the driving forces behind some of the performance. But, we sort of almost look like we maybe are getting a little bit worked out. One thing a Portsmouth supporter said to me, who was very quick to send me a text very early on Saturday morning, thanks very much, was that he just said, your game plan's pretty simple. We stop your fullbacks and you haven't got much else.
Yeah.
And I thought, look, I didn't even see the game at that stage, but the more I looked at it, we are probably pretty predictable without that creative force coming through the middle of the park that Honeyman, can provide.
Yeah. And even look, I mean, we'll probably talk in a little bit when we look at the season as a whole so far, and also Grant McCann as the manager. But I think the big elephant in the room as well is Lewis Potter again on the bench to start the game. Dan, I know we were sort of talking just before we went to air, and it's sort of echoed the thoughts that Logan and I were sharing last week, that really feels as if he's just being bullied at the moment to try and sign a contract. And the fact that, there's also these rumors that if he starts another game, there's some clause in his contract that will increase his wage or something like that. So it still seems a really murky sort of situation. But, talking about the fact that we're lacking that attacking spark, it seems that spark is Lewis Potter, and he's just not getting a run at it.
Yeah, look, I think you jumped in about half a second before I was about to speak and bring it up myself, honestly. But yeah, look, I fully just don't get this whole situation at all. If there's a clause in his contract, it's because the Allams put it in there in the first place. So if he's got to start, if he gets a pay rise when he starts another game, well, that's their fault. You can't just pull the pin on that now, because I get frustrated with, particularly in the A-League and stuff, and players who then just have their contracts torn up by mutual consent to go and join somewhere else, and all this contract stuff's annoying as all hell. But this one's not on the player at all. This is fully just all on the management, on the club itself, and the decisions and things that they're doing. And I think just to say, oh, well, we've got to pay him, even if he gets paid twice what he's getting now, he's probably still on peanuts because he's only 19. I just don't get that, and I think that whole situation, how that's playing out, and the fact that on top of that he's getting bullied that he's not going to start until he signs this new deal, which probably just cuts out that pay rise anyway, is probably half of it as well. But
I mean, we went through the same thing with Timon as well, I think, where he was on peanuts and wanted a pay rise, and we dicked him over on that as well.
Probably. It wouldn't. I could only imagine the long list of players that we've dicked over in contract negotiations.
Yeah, it's a long one.
But I think like this whole thing, and we were talking about it before, that there's so many different elements to this. You know, all this stuff about Keane Lewis-Potter's contract negotiations sort of came out a couple of weeks ago. And it's sort of coincidental that all these details have started coming out, that if he starts in the game, he has to get a pay rise, but he's not going to start another game until he signs the contract and all this. And then, but also the teams in general seem to be playing a little bit worse for wear. And I think I made the comment to you about that, like that team morale, like he's been such a good player and so young that they'd be all rallied around him and supporting him in this. And the clubs, as you said, has so eloquently has dicking him over. So I think that's playing a part, and that's another one of those situations where we're going, these things need to get resolved quickly, and they need to get dealt with in a way that benefits everyone. And that, I guess, really is just getting it sorted, getting the pen to paper, or just letting him play football, because that's what he's there to do. And when he came on, even against Portsmouth, he just added some nice impetus to us going forward and created a few chances. So I think while we don't play him, regardless of his contract situation, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. Brad, did you have anything to add to that about Lewis Potter's situation?
Yeah, look, I mean, we know early in the season he was our number one gun. The way I look at it is we go back to that round one, and if someone says to you, hey, this is how this guy can perform, build a team around him, you would. And here we are sitting there trying to squibble about minor or major issues with a contract, because it's all money related. That's all it is. How could you begrudge this guy getting paid any extra than what he was on? And probably the thing for me that probably hurts, and I think it's probably why people are getting so pissed off about it, to be honest, is that this is all being played out in the media in a way that is going to hurt everyone at the club, supporters, owners and players. I mean, all that needs to happen is someone to say it'll be fixed, and we all go, great. But at the moment, it doesn't even look like it's going to be fixed. The guy's one of our best assets at the moment, and the last time I heard, you're in a promotion-chasing season, like a genuine, not like we might make the playoffs, but hey, we should finish top two, and yet we're squibbling about one of our better players getting paid properly.
Yeah, it almost feels like Ahab's looked at the side and thought, they're travelling a bit too well. Let's take it down a notch. Find some way to undermine what's going on. Yeah,
I think his valuation methodology, mate, means that he's looking for a League Two place.
Yeah. Hey, look. Does anyone have any other final thoughts on the game? Otherwise, maybe we can go around with our 3-2-1 best players for this game, which I know probably are going to be difficult to put together in a pretty underwhelming game. Maybe I'll start with Brad. If any final thoughts, and then player ratings.
Oh, look, I think I'd give probably Magennis 3 because he scored. I'd probably give Greaves 2 because he scored. And I'd probably give KLP 1 because he at least came on and provided something. That's probably the only way I can sum it up.
I like it. Fair enough. Logan, what were your final thoughts and player ratings?
I think the quicker we get off this game, the better it's going to be for everyone. But look, honestly, I thought the 3 points had to go to Emmanuel. I thought that he was probably the only player that looked a threat frequently. He didn't turn the ball over too much, and apart from anything else, there was just not much else to compare him with. So I think he's a resounding 3 points. Outside of that, you could throw a blanket over the field. There wasn't really much to get excited about. I mean, Wilkes had his moments. I know Brad gave his 3 points to Magennis, but I've been really excited by the form that Magennis has showed. But he didn't have just a bad game. He had probably the worst game I think I've ever seen him play. And so for him to end up with 3 points from Brad is very kind. But it was an incredibly disappointing performance.
It's Christmas time, Logan. I think Brad's going for a bit of charity.
I know. Definitely. And the irony was Magennis he came the closest to scoring for us as well. So I guess there's a bit of irony in that. Probably reflects just how poor that game was. But to give you a 2-1, I think I would be doing the wrong thing. So I'm going to stop there if that's even all allowed.
Yeah, no, go for it. Fair enough. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, right. It seems to have gone a bit of a combination of Brad and Logan here. I'm giving the 3 points to Emmanuel to follow Logan. 1 point I was going to give to KLP for this game to echo Brad. And in the middle, I was tossing up between one of the midfielders. I couldn't decide between Slater and Doherty. So, but I think Slater was my first choice because I was watching the highlights and he had one really good shot and he was involved in one of Emmanuel's first really good breaks into the box. So I'll just give Slater 2 and be generous as well.
Yeah, look, and that's actually a really good one. I'd sort of slipped my mind with my vote, but Slater is one that there's been a bit of discussion on Twitter about him and what he adds to the side. But look, he had our only shot on target for the game, and he's a young kid. So he's not going to have any sort of amazing end product necessarily at this stage of his career, but he's a workhorse. He puts the energy in and the motivation in, and you can see he's going to try and push the ball forward. So I thought he was really impressive as well. So that's not a bad shout there at all, and probably worth a mention. And look, I mean, just to go completely different, I've gone for, and it shows just the diversity of opinion that we've got on this. I've gone Elder for the 3 votes, which, look, I might be a little bit coloured by his previous games where I think he got the 2 assists against Blackpool as well. But I think he's been putting together some pretty decent form for us. And look, Emmanuel's been one of my favourites on the right-hand side of the field, and Elder's certainly doing well on the left-hand side of the field. I gave the 2 to Doherty because I sort of, similar to you, Dan, was sort of throwing up between those 2 midfield options. And I think Doherty, since his return, has really made an effort and, obviously got the equaliser against Oxford. And he's not put many foots wrong in midfield, I wouldn't have thought. So he certainly seems to be busting a gut out there as well. And I went Burke for the 1 just because I thought of the 2 centre-backs, he was the one that didn't concede the own goal. So I've kind of gone opposite to Brad on that one. But I think he's been having a reasonable season too. And it was more an elimination of bad choices that I kind of ruled players out of getting the vote rather than ruled Burke in for getting the vote, was sort of how I arrived at that. But we will, as Logan was saying, we'll move on from that game and hopefully be a little bit more positive in our mid-season review. We'll probably talk about where we find ourselves now in a little bit, but just to start with some more positives, I thought we could go around the table and sort of think about what our favourite goal of the season so far has been, our favourite game of the season, and our player of the season to this stage of the season. So, Logan, I might start with you on this one if you've got a favourite goal, game and player, and sort of a reasoning for each of those.
Yeah. So I think my favourite goal of the season, although I think Doherty's goal was probably the best goal I've seen, I think I like the goal from Eves against Doncaster purely because of just the magnitude of how we played so well in that game. Then they slipped it back, and then after copping a whole lot of flack for some poor performances, to see him pop up and get that goal right at the death kind of just reminded me of how crazy football can be, and that one just resonates because of when it was scored. So I'd probably say Tom Eves' goal against Donny would be the one that stands out for me. The second question, the game of the year, probably. Yeah. I would probably say that one as well, just given the fact that, again, I like the story behind it being McCann's former club and just being able to pinch that result in the fashion that we did. I certainly put that up there. There's one more question, but I can't remember what it was.
Best player of the season so far, yeah.
Best player of the season so far for me, I think it has to be Honeyman. I think that Wilkes is probably in the conversation just because he has been clinical at times. And I was going to say Magennis is my most improved until the weekend. But
took a few steps backwards, hey?
that's right. But I think if we're talking from the start of the season to where we are now, I've been so impressed with George Honeyman, and I think the last two results in particular have really highlighted just how important he is to the City machine and what he offers when he's in the side. So Honeyman for me is my player of the season thus far.
And then Brad, your favorite goal, favorite game, and best player so far.
I think probably I was going to say Eves as well, but I'm going to move it now. I think the Doherty goal probably was my favourite goal in isolation. I think probably game of the season at the moment was, I don't know. I still have this debate about whether it's because we won or because we scored lots of goals, or, I'm still not sure which one. So I'm going to have to come back to you on that one.
Yep.
But I think player of the season, I think probably early on KLP was obviously generating the most excitement. It just seemed like he was the wonder kid. But I think, just to echo the sentiment so far, Honeyman not being there, and then even just visualising a couple of those balls he's played that have literally we've scored from, and the way he sort of is that workhorse but can create something in the middle is clearly what we've been lacking in these last few results. And so probably I'd have to agree at the moment, most important player is probably Honeyman.
Fair enough. I'll come back to you on your favourite game of the season then, and I'll throw to Dan for his goal, game, and player.
All right. Favourite goal, I have Keane Lewis Potter's runaway goal against Swindon Town. I think that was the equaliser, was it?
No, it was. I think it was to put us in front.
Does that put us in?
Yeah,
no, yeah. I think it's
one at the start.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But anyway, to pick that up inside our half, run through I think 4 defenders, and then slot it from, and he was still about bloody 18 yards out or something when he slotted it. Just tremendous athleticism and strength from a very small player to shrug all those to the midfielders and defenders off and then finish off so tidily. That's my favourite goal. Favourite game is the Ipswich 3-0. I think that really was just we were almost just about the peak of our powers so far in an attacking sense. I thought that was a game we really, really dominated. We created lots of chances. We scored some really good goals. And they were and nice and spread out, I think, because the first goal was only a couple of minutes in. And then I think one before half time and then one about halfway through the second half. So really nice goals. And linked to that, and something that Brad said, my best player is also George Honeyman. And Brad was talking something about some of the passes and things that he makes that we're maybe missing. And in that goal against Ipswich, in that first goal, was the ball came into Honeyman in the box, and it was a little disguised pass that he plays back to Wilkes, who then scores inside the near post. But I think Honeyman's energy and everything that he just brings so much. And as much as he was maligned last year for the quality that he did or didn't possess, I think he's really stepped into that role in the team this year, in that number 10 role, and really made it his own. And I think I made a joke in one of the earlier episodes about him leading us to the Premier League. It's just about being on his shoulders that we have got ourselves in such a strong position so far this season. And as others have alluded to, his presence has been so sorely missed. Whereas others who when they've stepped out, we thought we would miss and maybe haven't so much. Even KLP, we really thought that we would miss his directness, but it has been a loss, but not as significant as Honeyman's has been at this stage. So that's my reasoning for player, game, and goal.
Fair enough. No, good shouts, and a couple of those we're going to overlap with mine. So I'm glad that before we went to air, I was sort of thinking of other games and goals that take their place, because Ipswich is a great shout. I think I said at the time after the win that it was reminiscent of one of the games in the Barisi promotion year from the second time around from the championship, where we were sort of squatting aside promotion rivals with relative ease. So for me, favourite goal of the season, I've actually picked the other goal from the Donny game, which was the Magennis thunder bastard of a free kick in the first half, which I just loved it because it was a sign of a player at the top of his confidence. No doubts in his mind that he could just put an absolute, huge amount of energy behind it and just break the back of the net essentially. So that's probably my favorite goal of the season so far. Favorite game of the year, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and it's not a league game, but a cup game, and that was the win over Leeds, which feels like it was quite a while ago now. But to beat a Premier League side, I should say, yes, it was on penalties, but really should have been in normal time. It was a fantastic display, and that was sort of early on in the season when we were sort of unsure if we were sort of starting to gel, sort of starting to click as a side. We'd had a few, we'd had the 0-0 with Sunderland in the first round of the League Cup, and we're sort of still putting the side together really, and we sort of getting going early in the season. And to be 1-0 up against a reasonably strong Leeds side, and then come away with the win after penalties was a pretty enjoyable experience. And the banter on Twitter afterwards and social media afterwards was certainly a really enjoyable part of that as well. Best player, I think the easy answer would be to go with all three of you and say Honeyman as well, but I'll go with Josh Emmanuel just for the perspective that the difference between the expectation for him pre-season and what we've got from him over the course of this season has just been massive for me. And I think he's been a big part of the way that we've played this season as well. And I know Brad was sort of saying that the ability to stop our fullbacks really does unravel us at times. I think that's a large part down to just how effective Emmanuel's been, that if teams are managing to clamp down on him, then it does make it really difficult for us in games. So I think Honeyman's a great shout, and I think Emmanuel's a good shout as well for being right up there in the conversation for player of the season. Brad, did you have a favourite game of the season? Had you managed to I
did, mate, but then you've confused me now because you said that Leeds game was allowable, so I've now gone back to it. It was a three-way tie, so it was a two-way tie. Now it was a three. I've scrapped another one. So at the moment, the Bristol Rovers game was a shocker. We were awful. The first half, we should have probably been at least 2 goals down, if not 3. And then whether McGann gave them a spray or Ehab left the building, I don't know what it was, but I think we banged in 3 goals in about 10, 15 minutes. We looked awesome. And although I still remember pretty much ignoring the first hour or so, I actually thought that night, if we can go to Bristol and actually win midweek after looking terrible, we're a real chance. Now, that was some time ago and things have changed since then, but 3 goals away from home when we were rubbish was probably as close as I'll get to the Leeds game.
Fair enough. No, good shout there. Well, look, I mean, that's sort of the positives of the season so far. And we do have to put things in perspective. We're still reasonably high up the table. I actually haven't looked. Are we third on the table now? Third? Yeah. So we've dropped to third, given that we've lost that game to Portsmouth. Which, I'll sort of go around the table. But looking back on the season so far, I guess there's 2 ways to look at it. Is, in pre-season, I suspect we'd all agree that to be in this position at this stage of the season, we would have been quite happy to take. But the other perspective is, given where we would or how we were traveling over the first 2 months of the season, to be dropping off as we are, it's becoming a little bit of a concern. So I guess I'll start with you, Dan, and we can kind of go around the table, so to speak, with your thoughts on has the first half of the season sort of met expectations, exceeded expectations? Were the new expectations set, which have now sort of started to cause concerns, or like how do you sort of see it?
Could you not have asked me this a month ago? Would have been really easy to answer.
If it was a month ago, it's a very different episode, isn't it?
Yeah. I think with what I expected from the season going into it, and I haven't actually. It would be interesting to actually listen back to those couple of that episode probably before the season began, our early previews, to see what we were expecting from the season exactly. But I think we were expecting to be competitive and be. I think we'd set promotion as our thing, but I don't think we ever really said playoff. I mean, we said playoffs were probably the expectation, but not an automatic spot. To be essentially in that, and the only reason we're not is because we've thrown 3 games away in a row. That's the negative, is that we've thrown those 3 games away, but the positive is that we've got ourselves in a position where it hasn't actually hurt us that much. We're a point off, like, behind first and second. So, and now, because of, I think, another incident, we've now got 2 weeks or something until our next game, just about, or 10 days or something. It's not until
not until the 30th.
we're supposed to play. We're supposed to play on the Boxing Day or something, weren't we? And then that got postponed. Yeah, so we've got a big break. Hopefully, everyone gets whatever it is that they need, a rest, some time with the missus, I don't know, to get themselves a bit of vim and vigor and back in form and everything. But I think overall we're still in a really strong position. As disappointing and disheartening as this last 3 games has been, I still see our so far as a success. My concern is that we are just about mirroring what happened in the championship last season, that we went really strong right up until Christmas. We managed to get till just after Christmas to New Year's Day last season, but it all fell apart, and it looks, I'm concerned that we have hit our peak already and we're going on a downward trend. I guess only time will tell on that front, but if that's the case, then I think that is really throwing McCann's coaching credentials, managerial credentials, into disarray, because once, fool me once, shame on, you, fool me twice, shame on me, sort of thing, I think. If it happens again, then and in a lower league, then I just don't know. But overall, I still think we should be counting so far of this season as a success.
Fair enough. What do you think, Logan?
I think if we were to have this conversation even prior to the Portsmouth game, I think we probably would have remained incredibly optimistic, saying that we're top of the league at Christmas time, essentially. So I think independently, if you look at our position on the ladder, well, it's been a fantastic start to the season. And I guess you could start to ask yourself, what's the alternative? If we were kind of languishing mid-table and had a string of wins together and were building some momentum, would we prefer that? I don't think that that's necessarily the right alternative. So the position we find ourselves in is a great one. And I think that, as Dan kind of alluded to, is the break has come at the perfect time. I think, given the fact that we have surrendered three games in a row, whereas if we had as much taken points from one of those, we would be in an incredibly promising position starting the new year. But given that break and the chance to kind of rest up, reevaluate, and recharge the batteries, then I am optimistic. But I would have to say that there's some huge concerns around McCann. It probably is highlighted more so by the Kane Lewis Potter contract situation and recent dealings. But as far as how we are as a football team, we still do have, as we've mentioned, some incredibly gifted fullbacks who are really dangerous when they get forward, and we definitely have goal scorers in our team with perhaps who I strongly believe is the best central midfielder in the championship in Honeyman. So, look, I'm pretty confident. I still remain optimistic, and I'm still happy with how the season's progressed so far. But it is a very precarious time, and it's going to be hugely interesting to see what happens over the next month of football.
Yeah, and look, it's a fair point. We could be Sunderland down in 11th place with 1 win in their last 5, and would be looking a lot bleaker. And yes, they've changed their manager, so maybe they'll start to put a few results together. But it's as you say, Logan, would you rather be, or even would you rather be a Crewe Alexandra in 9th with 4 wins in their last 5 and sort of gaining momentum, but they're still, 6 points behind the top 2 sort of situation. And you're right. I think it's an interesting sort of one. I think from the outside looking in, I suspect most people would think that we're traveling quite well, and it's sort of just a blip, and everyone has these blips. But Brad, do you think it's just a blip? Do you think we'll sort of recover? I mean, I guess Dan's point, which is a fair one, is it's starting to eerily echo last season, and how many more sort of dropped points or losses would it take for you to really start to have alarm bells ringing?
Probably one more. I think realistically, expectations at the start of the season, if we could be 3rd at the turn of the year, and probably most importantly for us anyway, have scored near on 2 goals a game, we'd be sort of quite happy with that. I think realistically, we probably all sort of thought that we'd be a playoffs chance. I'd like to think auto promotion, but with our track record, it's never been great. But just to echo some of those comments there, this turn of the year always scares me when you've been high flying for a few weeks and all of a sudden drop 9 or 10 or 11 points on the trot. But I think probably there's still one little eerily strange point that I keep pointing back to is we've actually got a bloody good squad. This league, we should be, stretching right out to players 24, 22 to 24, somewhere like that. Whereas clearly other clubs don't have that, ability to drag 20 to 25 players through a whole season, or quality ones anyway. So you would think that at some stage when we start getting into games 30 to 40 odd, that we should really be starting to show that we've got depth that other clubs haven't, bar a few. So I'm still probably a little bit frustrated and still don't like seeing the last 3 results. But I think, to be honest, the next 2 are probably it. If we can see us knocking over teams that are in the top half, then the faith will be restored. But if we can't, I hate to think how quickly the monkey's on McGann's back and whether he's got that stand-up leadership that the other players are going to start following him, or if the KLP situation just infiltrates it even further.
Yeah. And look, I mean, that's probably a good segue into talking about McCann more specifically at this point. Normally each week we've been reviewing a particular player, and so I thought it was fitting that this week we review McCann's tenure at the club so far, because he's been here for about 18 months now, which surprisingly, I mean, like that's probably almost equal to Nigel Adkins' time at the club as well. So, kind of approaching being our longest manager since Steve Bruce, which is kind of strange to say in a way. So he obviously became manager last summer after Adkins failed to sign a new deal with the club. Came in with pretty, reasonable credentials, having taken both Peterborough and Doncaster to the playoffs, I believe. I think he took Peterborough to the playoffs, or maybe just fell slightly short. And his style of play was quite an attractive one. It was that sort of high tempo, high pressing style, which the start of last season in the championship worked really well. We were sort of conceding a few late goals, but on the whole, it was working quite well. And then obviously we know the rest last season after Bowen and Grzycki left the club. We've sort of just been talking about how we're sort of starting to see similarities this season, but you also need to look, off the pitch, the way he's interacting in media interviews. We've sort of alluded to it as well with the KLP situation, sort of dragging that through the press as well. I guess there's concerns that he's very much a yes man to Ehab, which in a way probably makes this conversation redundant, because it probably suggests that he's not in any danger of being sacked. But I know we've sort of had the conversation during the COVID break that if not for that, would he potentially have been sacked if the season had continued as normal? And that losing run had really started to feel the pressure, and there were fans in the stadium, and you sort of get a much more toxic atmosphere towards the manager. I guess, Dan, I'll start with you on this one. In terms of McGann's time at the club, do you think he can still be a success at the club, or do you think, given all of these hallmarks of, as you perfectly put it, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, we're sort of seeing the same failings the second time around?
Yeah, look, I know I brought it up, but I think I do want to just preface by saying I do think it's a bit premature to really make that comparison. It's just in the back of my mind that it is starting to look the same way. But look, I think overall it would hard to call his time here successful. He's overseen I don't know, like, it's more than even just a relegation. Like, that, it was a fall from grace. Like, we were, I think, what was it, sixth or seventh at the turn of the year last season to then finish. We finished bottom.
Yeah, finished bottom.
Yeah.
I saw screenshots in a championship group for Stoke's season and how they've improved so much this season. And it was a screenshot from last season's bottom half of the table where Stoke was, 20th or something, and now they're 6th. And it was just such a sort of reality check that we weren't even in that screenshot as being sort of that bottom 13, 14 clubs to fall that far that quickly.
Yeah. So there's that, but look, I don't know. I think it's really this. if he's winning games and he gets out and he'll see out this season, but if he's not winning, if this poor form continues, then it would be hard to see how he would last the season. But then the conversation becomes who is available that wants to come, because you certainly know wages aren't going to be something that's offered to a manager.
Yeah.
So any of the decent managers probably aren't going to want to come because they'll have a little bit of profile, and with that comes a little bit of demands. But no point getting too much into that conversation at this stage. But yeah, look.
Do you still see him as someone? So you still think you're quite comfortable that potentially this is just a blip, and that he can sort of steer the ship, correct the ship and get us back on track and still get us promoted?
Come back to me in 10 games time.
Fair enough. Logan, what are your thoughts on, I guess, McCann's tenure at the club so far in general, and any sort of warning signs that you're seeing over this last, it's coming up to a month of poor performances.
Yeah. Again, worrying times. I think that the fact that this conversation's taking place when it is probably hasn't helped McCann's I guess, favour with the opinions that we're probably going to express here, given the fact that if this happened at the start of December or late November, then we might have had a much higher opinion. But, I mean, you have to remember with McCann is he's taken the managerial appointment of death, so to speak, by signing with Hull. Our owners are notoriously difficult to deal with. I mean, even just a walk down memory lane and to look at the managers that they've broken. Steve Bruce, from all reports, is a pretty honourable and reasonable type manager. I know that he's certainly not in the game of football for a big paycheck, so to speak. And what he did with City was really interesting to see how quickly he was kind of discarded. Then just the way they dealt with Silva and how he got kind of moved off pretty quickly. Like the question is, how hard did they actually chase him, and what was the package that they put together for him? And then lastly, and I think probably the most concerning of them all, was Nigel Atkins. I mean, if there's a more positive man walking on this planet, then I'm yet to kind of see him. And so the fact that McCann took that appointment was really interesting. It probably shows a lot about who he is. I think he is a competitive guy. And as you said, like, he's got a lot of promise when it comes to attacking football. He's never had problems scoring goals. And I think we've seen the fruits of that. If we look at the front line, as you and I were chatting about earlier in the week, Alex, with the amount of multiple goal scorers we have that have shown huge returns in the start of the season. Goals have never really been a problem to come by, but it's when teams start to figure us out defensively where we really start to struggle. And as of yet, I'm yet to see McCann deliver an answer for that. And if there's any kind of hole in his game or area that worries me, it is his defensive frailties. And if he can correct those things, I think that maybe he is the man to continue taking us forward. But we've got some really big games coming up against some big teams, and to see that will be pretty intriguing, I guess, from all City perspectives, as to what our goal return looks like, firstly, but secondly is how leaky is our defence going to be. I'm kind of similar to Dan. I would love this question a bit further down the track in 10 games' time.
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a really telling stretch over the next month or so in terms of how we turn this around potentially, or whether we slip into more of a precarious position. I mean, we've given ourselves a really great springboard to get promotion, and unfortunately it's a little bit like last season, where you would have said that come January 1st, we were giving ourselves a really good springboard to make the playoffs, and then it all just sort of unraveled from there. But up until that Shrewsbury game, we'd scored in every game, so that attacking football was there, and we were creating a lot of chances. And it really does seem like it could be as simple as Honeyman comes back into the side, we look a completely rejuvenated side, and we get back to scoring goals, and all these issues are put behind us. But I guess that the really telling thing would be if Honeyman comes back into the side and it doesn't actually make a difference, and this sort of poor form continues. So, as you say, I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next few games. Brad, did you have any thoughts so far on McCann's time at the club?
Look, I think probably other than adding anything that's already been said, the only thing I can probably think of is he would have known what he was getting into when he joined us. clearly any manager that looks at this as a job and says, hey, the last, technically 3 managers have all left basically because of finances or disputes with the owner. You'd have to be thinking you're accepting the job on a shoestring budget and without much support to do exactly what you want. So, I actually give him some credit for thinking that he can actually take the job on and make it really work, because I think it shows he's got some confidence in his own ability. But the only thing that I'm starting to get a bit annoyed with is when you want some answers, we're not getting them. I admire the fact that we might discuss a little bit about the KLP thing, but to be honest, probably not the right time or place either. But at times we want to actually hear where he's frustrated, not just, I thought we did okay here and we broke him down here, but then we did this and that. How about saying I'm pissed off? We should be putting these teams away, having some confidence, saying we are the top half of the league and I'm going to push this from my end backwards, almost like Adkins did. Adkins had his critics, but there was times there where he'd be talking us up and we're all thinking we're no chance. And in the end, players start believing a bit. I think at the moment it's almost like part of that belief drain has actually come from him.
Yeah. No, and that's a fair point as well. Look, it's a frustrating one because, for instance, you look at Watford have just sacked their manager and they're in 5th or 6th position in the championship, and everyone's sort of, granted, Watford's owners have priors in multiple manager sackings in a single season, but from the outside looking in, everyone sort of doesn't understand what they've done. And I suspect if we were to sack McCann, everyone would have similar thoughts of us, because they'd say, geez, you're 3rd in the table, you're flying. But from the inside, there's a lot of concerning signs there, and there's a lot of work to be put right to get us back on track. I suspect it's look, as I say, it could be as simple as getting Honeyman back into the side, but I suspect there's other bridges to mend as well. I think we need to see KLP back in the starting 11 as well, and some. I don't think we'll actually get any sort of apology or comment from EHAB or the club, but I guess something probably needs to be done there. Whether it's a simple, look, KLP could end up signing a new deal. It could be resolved, and that could help things as well. But I guess we will see. Look, just before we finish off the episode, it's been a great one. We will look ahead to that Lincoln City game. It is 9 days away, but we do have the small matter of Christmas in the meantime. So I think it's probably best to do the preview in this episode so we can all have a nice rested Christmas break. It's going to be a big clash again. They're sitting in 2nd in the table, just above us, a point above us. So, look, we've got a game in hand on Portsmouth. If we were to beat Lincoln as well, it then gives us the chance to go back top of the table and put that ability back in our hands. Managed by Michael Appleton. I'd actually forgotten that he was assistant at Leicester under Craig Shakespeare. And so when Shakespeare was sacked from Leicester, Appleton actually got 2 games in the Premier League in charge of Leicester and won both of them. So I always sort of associate him more with his spells with, Blackpool and Portsmouth, ironically enough, both when they were both struggling quite a bit. So he strikes me as that sort of really tough manager who can work on a shoestring budget that clubs that are really sort of struggling can bring in and sort of try and get a bit of stability back. And he seems to be doing a pretty good job with Lincoln as well. I think he took over Lincoln when the Cowley brothers went off to Huddersfield. So he's certainly done well with them as well. We haven't played them since 2004. We played them in League 2, I think was the last time we played them, back in 2004. And it was called the old Division 3. And then in terms of their form, they've won 3 of their last 5, but funnily enough, also lost 1-0 to Shrewsbury. So perhaps that's not as bad a result as we would have thought at the time. Sort of bit of a local derby, I guess you would say. I think that they're sort of close enough that a few people look out for this game at the start of the season. So it'll be an interesting one. I'll start with you, Dan. Lincoln, see much chance of a bounce back? I guess the 9 days does give Honeyman and others a chance to be fit. Maybe that will sort of right a few of the wrongs.
Yeah, look, I think that those 9 days are going to be crucially important in this game. We have 9 days to sort out KFC's contract situation. We have 9 days for Honeyman to get fit and ready. And we have 9 days to practice fucking putting the ball in the net again.
Yeah.
At the right net, not the one behind Ingram. The one
had enough practice to that, yeah.
Look, if we're at our best, we're more than capable of winning this game. my concern is that we won't be at our best. And if we're not, I think we will struggle to take points at all. So I think I'm just going to go somewhere in the middle. I'd tip a draw, probably. But yeah, the only other thing I have to say is just to make a note, that 10 games time, that's after we play MK Dons in February, Alex, when we come back to talk about McCann.
I'll make a note of that. We'll reconvene and do a check-in on what our thoughts are on him at that point. Absolutely. Logan, what are your thoughts on this one? Would you make any? I mean, I guess the obvious change to the side would be Honeyman in. Would there be anything else that you'd look to change for this game?
Well, I think that's definitely one of them, and the second one would be KLP starting. I mean, you make those two changes, and I would say that we're pretty much at full strength, and you would really say that we're at the races. I kind of want to touch on what Brad said before, and he really kind of reminded me of just how great the squad truly is. Like the depth that we do have and the players on our roster. We really just have no reason to fear any team, and I think that it becomes quite difficult to kind of carry that mindset into these games when you go through a bit of a bad patch or through a losing run. It's easy to be really kind of pessimistic and concerned that the failures set in. But realistically, those 9 days off, as Dan mentioned, or the 9 days that we still have off, is a huge opportunity for us to correct a lot of really critical things around the club. And I think if they use this time wisely, it'll be the perfect break for City, and I'm positive. I don't know. My optimism's been tested a lot lately, and I've had it perhaps unwarranted in some of the games that we've found ourselves on the receiving end of, especially highlighted in that Portsmouth result. But I do think that we can get a result against Lincoln, and I'd be really surprised if we didn't, given the fact that we're coming fresh off a break, and I think everyone will be incredibly hungry to kind of correct some of the wrongs that have happened in recent times, and I don't think it can come soon enough.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to say 1-0.
1-0. I like it. Brad?
I'm going to back my usual pessimistic trend of Tuesday night games, and I'm going to say that we're going to win 2-0. We're going to look quite convincing, and this may or may not be correct. I'll have to check the facts later. But I have a feeling we haven't lost a Tuesday night game at home, at least this season and well into the last season, in the first half of the season, of course. So, in other words, please don't check that stat. It may or may not be correct, but I'm running with it. So 2-0, we score more goals than them, we win. That's it.
Can I just say, Brad, I just did a very, very quick check, and then I just checked literally our last Tuesday night game against Blackpool, and we did in fact lose it. But we'll go before then. Was
that a league game?
Right. Sorry?
League game?
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Probably before the Blackpool game, I suspect you're probably right.
Yeah, up until that Blackpool game, yeah, that's right.
The only other thing I didn't even think about before, but Lincoln still plays. They play Burton only a couple of days before they play us, so that's a bit of fatigue maybe sets in for them, and we'll be very fresh. So perhaps that will play a factor as well.
Yeah, and actually, because as I was sort of saying that we have that game in hand on Portsmouth, I was sort of realizing as well that we'll actually have 2 games in hand on Portsmouth and a game in hand on Lincoln. So if Lincoln drop points against Burton, it means that if we beat Lincoln, we'd be ahead of them with a game in hand. So there's a lot of permutations to play out over the Christmas period. And I think you're right, but I think everyone's right in talking about the fact that being rested over that period will be really, really good for us. I think it means that the players can probably have a relatively normal Christmas day, which is probably going to be good for their morale. It means we can get a decent training session in on Boxing Day. Everyone can come back in decent shape, and we can be fresh and focused on that Lincoln game, which should be in our favour, really. Because yes, as we're saying, Lincoln have Burton on Boxing Day, I think. So that will be an interesting clash for them as well. I'm once bitten, twice shy sort of thing. I think I'll agree with Logan and try and be optimistic on this one and go with a 1-0 City win. I think a lot does come down to the lineup. I think for me, Honeyman's more important than KLP, I think, in a few ways. On field, more important to have Honeyman. I think off field, probably more important to have KLP for morale. But I think as long as at least Honeyman's in the lineup, I'll be feeling a little bit more optimistic about this one and go with the 1-0 as well. But that just about wraps things up, guys. Did anyone have any final thoughts before we signed off? No? All good? Okay. Well, thanks for joining me, Dan.
No worries, mate. Anytime.
And thanks for joining me, Brad.
Thanks, gents. Have a good Christmas, everyone.
You too. And thanks for joining me, Logan.
Alex, my pleasure.
No worries. And thanks, everyone, for listening in. As always, give us a like on YouTube, share the video around, share the video on Twitter as well. Give us your thoughts on your favorite goal, favorite player, and favorite game of the season so far, and what you thought of ours as well. I think if you click the bell on YouTube, you'll actually get notifications for when these videos are about to go live. So hopefully people are able to join us live for these episodes, which would be great. But otherwise, have a very Merry Christmas to everyone over in the UK, everyone here at home in Australia as well. Most importantly, stay safe. Let's hope for a better 2021 all round on field and off field. But until next time,